All right, so I guess that's it then. It must be 6 o'clock UK time. We're now kicking off. So, first of all, thank you so much for joining me wherever you are in the world. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Tonight, we're going to be going through a whole bunch of things in both Photoshop and Lightroom. Some of the things I've been asked about specifically to cover. So, I'm going to go through those, and a couple of things which I've kind of never shown. They're a bit of fun, but there is also a very serious side to it. But before we get into that, going to go through just a couple of things. First of all, some thank yous. First of all, thank you to BenQ. Very proud to be an ambassador of BenQ, of which there's only a few now. They've had a real big shake-up of things and redoing things. So there's only a few of us in the world which are ambassadors. So I'm really, really proud of that. I was using their monitors way before I was even involved with them. We'll talk about those in just a moment. Also, thank you to Lemesca and also to Camera Centre UK, who are actually working with us on this. And on that note, keep an eye on the chat, because I know that Camera Centre UK are going to be putting like a code together that if you are interested in getting a BenQ monitor or display, there's a code in there that's going to give a certain percentage off those as well. So just keep an eye on the chat. Talking of the chat, if you do have any questions as we go through it, feel free to just post them in there. Don't expect me to answer them straight away, because I know Kate, who's working behind the scenes making this all run smoothly, she'll be kind of looking at them and feeding them through as and when. And rather than me kind of stopping as we're going through each technique, we're going to kind of leave the questions until right at the very end. So I'll try and save some time for that, and then we can go through some of those. Any hard questions, keep them to yourself. Keep them to yourself. Right. So let's have a quick look at my screen here then. So before we dive into it, I just want to let you know the monitor that I am using, and that's this one, which is here. It's a 32-inch. I've got it to my left-hand side, 32-inch display. 99% Adobe RGB, 100% sRGB, but there's so many things I could say about it, but I don't want to go into too much detail about it tonight. But the main selling point, or two main selling points for me on this display, which is why I use it, is number one, the size. I'm fortunate that we've got quite a good sized desk here, but also it's got this anti-glare screen. So no matter what angle I look at it, it doesn't change the kind of brightness or the color values. I can still see it as good straight on or from either side. So that's really useful, especially when you do presenting and you've got these things like video lights. In fact, let me just show you my desktop setup. These are little, actually, this is like a little bonus tip for you. When we're in Photoshop here, let me just start this up. I'm going to show you my desktop setup live. So I'm going to go to the file menu, and down here we've got import from iPhone or iPad. I'm going to say take photo. Now look at my phone screen. When I click on take photo, it'll turn on the camera, right? So I'm now going to go back here and I'll take a photo and then say use photo, and that will automatically turn up in Photoshop really, really quickly. So there you go. So that's my 32-inch display on the left-hand side here. A few other little gadgets. And this is a different BenQ monitor that I have. I've had this for a couple of weeks now. Great for doing video. It's like an ultra wide monitor. But the main one for working on photos wise is this one here. So pretty cool tip, that, isn't it? With it getting old, send it straight through from your phone onto the screen. Very, very useful. But anyway, let's just dive in. Let's just crack on and go through some of the stuff that I want to show you this evening. So the first one, we'll dive into Lightroom. And again, this has got a bit of a fun element to it, but there is also a very serious side to it, is how you could actually use this technology. We hear about AI so much these days. It's kind of into everything, and it's sometimes can be a little bit daunting, but sometimes can be incredibly useful. And that's what I want to show you now. So there's a group of photos up here that I took of my friends. Here's actually one of the final edits. This is my friend Ian Munro, and the out of camera shot is this one here. Now, I'm going to kind of show some things on this picture here that I wouldn't ordinarily do on this picture of Ian. All right, but you'll see what I mean about the serious side of it, how useful this could be. I'm going to go to the develop module, and I'm going to go to the masking section, which is one of the huge inputs that we've had in both Lightroom and Camera Raw over recent months. Just such good technology. We'll go into the masking section, and when I do that, you'll see, hopefully, that you'll see that it starts to detect if there's any people in the actual picture. And straight away it does. And if I hover my cursor over the thumbnail of that person's face, which is identified, you can see we get the red overlay saying there's the person. But if I click on that, it then opens up even more options where we can actually split that particular mask into different parts. So we've got face skin, body skin, eyebrows, eye sclera. Never even knew it was called that. The whites of the eyes is called the eye sclera. Who knew that? Iris and pupil, lips and hair. So what I'm going to do, rather than having the entire person, I'm just going to put a tick in every single one of these areas here. Okay, so now it's going to create 7 separate masks as opposed to 1 mask for the whole person. All right, so let's have a look here. I'm going to click on create mask. And what you'll see then, hopefully, is that we've now got in the masking section all individual masks. And as I put my cursor over each of the thumbnails, you'll see that it shows the red overlay indicating what part of that portrait that mask is for. In fact, if I click on one of the thumbnails, what you'll see is it opens up and it says person 1 hair. This one here will say person 1 lips and so on. The only thing I don't like about this at the moment, so fingers crossed Adobe changed this, is that unless I click on it, the only way of me knowing what that mask is by putting my cursor over it. I just wish, as it created those masks, it would also name them in the main menu part here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just rename them very quickly. Click on the little 3 dots, the ellipsis just here. Let's go on this first one here. This is going to be the hair. So click on that, click on rename, and we'll just say hair. I'll just very quickly go through these. This one's going to be lips. So rename, and we'll go lips, oops, Leo's, whatever that is. Iris, rename, so we'll say eyes. And this one's going to be the whites of the eyes, so we'll just do rename, and I'll put sclera, now that I know what that is. Eyebrows. Eyebrows. Just a couple more. And then we've got the neck just here, neck skin, so we'll go to neck. And finally, we'll have face. So we'll just do rename and put face. So now that I've got all these masks here, obviously I can dive in and I can affect each one of those individually. So let me just go to the hair first of all. And again, just for a bit of fun, but just think about how you could use this if you were maybe somebody who took a lot of photos, maybe like a wedding photographer or family photographer, or you took events or groups and stuff where there's a lot of people in there, or maybe a picture of the same person in a lot of pictures that you needed to do the same edits to. This would be a huge, huge time saver. So let me just show you with a bit of fun. We'll get his hair first of all, and we'll just change the color of his hair. All right, so I know my friend Anthony's watching this at the minute. So Anthony, do not tell Ian that I did this. All right. So let's just change the color of his hair. We'll then go to his lips, and we can come down to this section over here where it says color. We'll click on that and we'll choose a nice red color. That's definitely Ian's color there. And we'll just increase the saturation. Let's just go for the eyebrows. We'll change the color of the eyebrows as well. Increase the saturation on those. And we'll just go to the face. And what we'll do with the face is we'll go to the tone. Let's just increase the exposure on it, but then go to the color and we'll just desaturate it. So something like, in fact, let's do the neck as well. Let's go for the neck. We'll increase the exposure, go to the color and reduce the saturation. Right, so all joking aside and what have you, what we've done here is we've created masks of individual parts very quickly of that one person's face. And what we can do now is this is what's really clever about all of this. We can come over to the left-hand side here, we have our presets, and we're going to create a preset. If any of you are used to using Photoshop and creating actions, this is kind of like creating an action within Lightroom, but an intelligent action. And you'll see what I mean in a moment. We'll create preset, and we'll just call this one fun. And in here now, we've got all the options of the things that we've done, that if we want to include those within this preset. Now we've only used the masking. So we'll click on check none, and I'm going to click on the masking. So all of the parts of the masking are now being included. And then we'll just, and it's going into the group called user preset. So we know where it's going to be, easy to find. And then we'll just click on create. And what'll happen now is if I go to the user presets, we'll see that preset is applied just here. So imagine now then, you've either got pictures of that same person in a load of different pictures that you needed to do the same edits to. Could be a bride, it could be whatever. Or you've got a group of people that you want to do some edits to very quickly. So now look, if I go to my group of pictures here, here's my friend Anthony. I had to do it, Anthony. I know you're in the room and I know you're watching this, but I had to do this. But if I now put my cursor over that preset, the one we called fun, look at this, look how quickly it's going to detect it and it's going to do that. I'm not even clicking to apply it. It's just a quick preview. incredible, absolutely incredible. And to be fair, I'll do it to myself as well. Let's just go into here. There's the out of camera shot. We go to the actual preset, put it over there, and then moments later, it applies it. So like I said, joking aside, the technology, let's get that off there. We don't want to see that. But the technology here is just looking very quickly at the people in the picture, recognizing what's a head, what's an eye, what's a mouth, all that kind of stuff, and being able to apply those things intelligently onto the actual images as well. So a huge, huge time saver for anybody who does groups, weddings, and what have you. So that was one thing, but that's going to kind of lead me on to something else now that we have in Photoshop. So let me just take, let's have a look here. Let's take this picture here over into Photoshop. So I'll hold down my Command or Control key and press E, and we'll send over a copy rather than playing around with the original. So we'll send this over into Photoshop. Now, in Photoshop, those of you who play around in it, you'll know that obviously we have filters. We've also got neural filters. So looking at what we've just done there with makeup type of stuff, let's have a look now at what we can do within the neural filters. So we'll go filter and neural filters. When you're looking at these neural filters here, you'll see that a lot of them do have this like cloud icon with a little down arrow. That means that you need to download that particular filter before you can use it, and it just takes a few moments. And then once you've got them, you've got this little toggle switch that you can turn on and off to be able to use that. One thing that's worth noting as well within the neural filters is at the top where it says the name here, all filters, there's also one next to it that says waitlist. And this is kind of those ones that that Adobe are kind of working on and that could well appear in Photoshop if we think, or if they get enough kind of interest in it. So a little plea from me, a Photoshop user, have a look at these here, because if you think that could be good, let's say the long exposure, water long exposure, which could be really good for doing long exposures, maybe if you're like a drone photographer and you can't hold the drone steady for 30 seconds or so, maybe some software could help to create the look of it. Click on the actual name of that filter and then say, I'm interested. And then you can put a little thing into here to say, what's your workflow? So they can kind of collate this to say, look, we're getting a lot of interest in this filter. Let's bring it in. So that's just a little bit of a plea from me there. All right, let's close that down. But let's go back to this filter here. We've got the filters at the top here for using on portraits. And the one I want to quickly show you is makeup transfer. And again, kind of think about how this could possibly fit into your workflow. I've got a friend of mine called Sean McCormack, who's a wonderful portrait photographer based over in Ireland. And I know that a few years ago, because Sean works on his own, he actually did a makeup application course so that he didn't have to rely on getting a makeup artist in when he was doing taking portraits of females and what have you. So this, again, could be something that could be useful in that side of things. But let's have a look. We've got this makeup transfer. What does it actually do? Well, I'll come over to the right-hand side. Here is the main interface for it. Once we've got our main picture that we want to apply the makeup onto, we can then say, right, select an image and then navigate onto your computer to where you've got a picture that maybe has got a portrait where there is makeup on it that you think, now that would look great on that person. So we'll click on this one here. I did have a portrait of a lady for a financial company. We'll say use this image, and then very quickly it'll then apply it. And you can see there, look now. So this is the portrait that it's looking at the makeup on the eyebrows, the eyes themselves, the lips, the cheeks, and it's applying it. If I turn that off and on, you can see how that's doing it. So obviously the AI is recognizing where those facial features are so that it can apply the makeup. Now, how far can you push this? Well, I was playing around earlier on, as you do, and for me, the best way to learn is just by having a bit of fun. But let me show you first of all this one here. This is a picture of my brother and sister-in-law when they got married. And that's not a close cropped picture, but what you can do then, you can get your cursor and basically drag an outline around the person whose makeup you want to use, which is my sister-in-law, and then it'll apply it there, which is pretty cool. But let's have a look, something else. Let's push it even further. We've got this fashion image here, I don't know who the photographer was, so I can't credit them. So we'll jump over this one quite quickly. Use this image, quite crazy kind of makeup, but look, it does a pretty damn good job of applying that. Really, really useful stuff. So just, the possibilities here, and this is just the beginning of all this, is really quite exciting. I did actually find one picture of the Joker to see what it would do with that. Okay, maybe. who knows, whatever possibilities there, but there's so many of them. But it's just fun to learn and to see what's being used. But there is definitely a serious application that you could use with this stuff. So talking of neural filters, there was a technique I showed a while back on my YouTube channel, and I'll show it on this picture here. A picture I took of my friend called Trigger. And one of the things I love to do with portraits, mainly close-up portraits, but also now I'm doing it with full-length shots, is to kind of give it a bit more depth, where it almost feels like that person's coming forward. Now, there's only so much you can do with dodging and burning and sharpening. You actually create more of the effect of the illusion of them coming forward when we add blur. Okay, and this depth, there's a depth blur filter within the neural filters, which is really, really clever at doing that. So what I'll do is I'll go to this picture here. This is the one that is not even, well, it's not even been edited. This is the one of Trigger before I'd actually done the editing. And let's get this over into Photoshop first of all. And I'll just have a little bit more space over, in fact, no, we'll leave it like that. And what we'll do is also open up another image, which is going to be on my desktop, webinar, and we'll go for this one here. This is a good one to show what this actual filter does. So let me now just go into the filter menu and we'll choose neural filters. And the one I'm going to be using is this one here, depth blur. It says it's a beta, it's not the full version, so you might find that when you do use it, you might get a few issues with it. I haven't, but it's really, really good. So let's just turn this on. And then over here now, we've got certain controls. You'll see at the bottom down here, you'll get occasionally this progress bar coming up where it's processing it. This basically now, this software looks at your image and says, right, it knows what's close up, what's in the foreground, it knows what's in the middle ground, and it knows what's in the background. And we can control the blur now to sort of decide what we want to be in focus and what we don't want to be in focus. So over on the right-hand side, you've got the controls here. The focal distance, this slider here, we can take it all the way to the left, all the way to the right. Now, if I take it all the way to the left and we give this a little bit of time to process, what that's basically saying is the far left means what's closest to you will be in focus and what's furthest away will be out of focus. So in this example here, this means that rocks here nearest to the camera are going to be in focus. The bits further away are going to be out of focus. If I take it all the way to the right-hand side, that's going to kind of change things. Once it's processed it, you can see now the rocks here are out of focus. The bits further in the distance are in focus. So that's what we can control with that. I'm going to maybe take it so that, in fact, I'll just leave that as it is there. Focal range, this is basically, think of this as being the aperture of your camera. When it's to the far left, that could be maybe shooting open, imagining almost like shooting open maybe f1.4. And if you take it all the way to the right, that could be maybe looking at photographing at, say, f22, a really closed down aperture. So far left, wide aperture, far right, closed down aperture. Now I want this to be a real closed, sort of wide open aperture, so it's all nice and blurry. So I would have it over on the left-hand side. Now you can decide also what you want to be in focus, either by clicking in this little button here that says focus subject. The AI analyzes it to see, right, what is the main subject here, and it's going to kind of decide for you. Or you can just come in and tap on an area in this preview box to say, all right, that's what I want to be in focus. All right, so now that we know the controls, there are other things we can do here, like control how blurred we want it. We can add haze and what have you, but we wouldn't necessarily do that for portraits. But let's just come out and we'll look at it now on this picture here of Trigger. So before I use it, the first thing I will do is create a copy. So on Mac, I'm holding down the Command key, on Windows, the Control key, and press J to jump a copy up onto the new layer. And then we'll go Filter, and we go to Neural Filters. I'll choose the depth blur. We turn it on by using that little toggle switch. The AI looks at it and goes, right, what's the subject here? I'll keep them in focus and I'll create blur everywhere else. And you can see it's processing it quite quickly. The bigger the file size, the longer it's going to take, obviously, because it's sending it up to the cloud, if you like, to analyze it and then coming back down again. So that's now done that. We can now say the focal range is to the far left, which means it's going to be a wide open aperture, so shallow depth of field, and I'll increase the blur strength. As I take that over to the right-hand side, we should see the progress bar at the bottom here as it's processing it. and eventually that'll then throw that back out for us. So just give that a moment to process it. Great thing great thing I like about this is when it creates that blur, it can create a really natural looking blur. So if I want my friend Trigger to be in focus, the background will be out of focus, but anything that's really close to the camera as well will be out of focus. So you get that kind of blur, no blur, then blur, and it just works an absolute treat. So at the bottom, it's processed it now. We can say, right, different methods that we want to now send it back into the main Photoshop workspace. I'll say we'll just take it in as a new layer and then send it in, and then we can kind of check it to see how it's done. But can you see now, look, there's the out of focus, his feet are in focus. If I turn that off and on, off and on. Now I could repeat that whole process to kind of make it look as if it's even more blurred, so it really, really does start to stand out. But I'm just loving this effect, and especially when it's printed, these kind of images, people do often comment that it just looks like they're coming out of the screen or out of the paper. It really, really does add that kind of depth and dimension to your portraits. I love it. It kind of reminds me, I don't know if you remember doing this years ago. This was something that was really popular years ago. If I just find a picture here, this is one I took with my drone here. This is of Lyme Regis, not far from where we live. If I just send this over into Photoshop, does anybody remember doing this before, when you created that illusion using blur to make it look as if things almost look like, I don't know, like Toy Town? It made it look almost like toy sort of area. This is how we used to do it. If I create a copy and I go filter and blur and Gaussian blur, I'll blur it, say around about sort of 10, and then click OK. We'll add a mask, get a brush with a black foreground color. And what I'll do is I'll just increase the size of that brush, and I'm only going to blacken out or only kind of remove the blur on the central area just here. So if I put my brush on one side, hold down the shift key and click over there, and now look. If I zoom in, I don't know if that's going to show up on your screen, but can you see, because we've got this blur, no blur, and then blur, it almost makes it look as if it's like a little toy kind of town. I used to love doing this years ago when you had aerial shots that you'd photograph down to a street with all the cars and the buses and the people. And when you create that blur with that one bit in the middle that isn't blurred, it just makes it look like something cartoonish. It's such a cool effect. Anyway, that's just me. Right, let's just come out of that one. Right, the next thing I want to show you is this picture just here. A guy called Andy Howe. I was asked about this one in particular to see how did I process it. So let's just go back to the webinar folder. It was actually this image here to see how did I end up processing it. Well, to be honest with you, if I show you what the out of camera shot was, that was the out of camera shot. The first thing I did with it, before I did things like dodging and burning and working on the eyes, which I'm going to show you in a moment, was just change the composition. I wanted to increase the sort of sides either side of Andy. And it's really, really simple to do. It gives you a lot more flexibility now that we can do this really, really easily. I'm going to unlock that layer, get the crop tool, and I'm just going to drag out to the left a little bit so that we get a bit of space on Andy's left-hand side, or the right-hand side there of Andy, and his eyes are right in the center. Now, I never use, because I have had people before say to me, you know, when you're using the crop, you know, in the toolbar at the top or the options bar at the top, there is a little checkbox you can tick that says content aware. I know it's there, but I never use it because that's, for me, that feels like I'm using it blind. There's no control. I'm kind of just putting a tick in and hoping for the best. So I don't tend to use that. What I tend to use the main content aware fill workspace. So once I've created that space there, I will then just kind of make a selection with my rectangular marquee tool to say, right, this is the area that I need to fill in. And then I would just go to the edit and content aware fill. This just gives so much control. Those of you who don't know, the green overlay here is basically where Photoshop's saying, look, I'm going to use this area here to fill in that bit that you want filling in. Is that okay? And if it does a good job, then fine. If it doesn't, you can actually kind of either add to it or remove it and say, look, don't use his hair in that part. And it'll kind of look at other areas to fill it in. But you can see it does a pretty good job straight away. So that was how I initially created the better composition with it. But the main questions I got was to do with the color grading. How did I do the black and white conversion? And how did I kind of give it that little bit of a tone in the black and white, but also make it look like his face was little bit brighter so it stood out just that little bit more. Let me just show you that. It's really, really simple. We'll just go to this picture here. I'm in the develop module and I'll go to the basics tab. Now, rather than using a preset, I use the profile. This is the color version of Andy just there, where I've just worked on his eyes and a little bit of dodging and burning. But to do the black and white conversion, first of all, nice and simple, I just clicked on browse. And in here, we've got a black and white folder that's got loads of different versions of black and white. So, you know, if you've got Camera Raw or Lightroom, you've got all these built in. And the one I used for this picture of Andy here was number 11. And I love this because it's kind of flattened out the blacks. It's got almost like a filmic look to it. Once I clicked on that there, I then have this amount slider at the top. And this amount slider here doesn't mean that you can either remove the amount of black and white or increase it. It's to control the whole black and white effect. So if I take it to the left, you can see there it kind of removes all the effect. It's just a simple black and white. If I take it to the right, it increases that effect. So I'll take it to around about, say, there. Now, once I did that, then because obviously we are using a RGB image, which we've now converted to this black and white, we do still have access to all the color channels within it so that we can affect how the image looks. So ordinarily, you might think of diving into where it says black and white here, where you've got the red, orange, yellow, green sliders. And you can see here that you can do these to affect the color channels within that black and white image. But I don't tend to do that now, even though that can be good. I tend to prefer to use the color grading. So let me just show you how I do that. We'll go to the color grading section. In here, we've got the color wheels where we've got the shadows, midtones, and highlights. It's the midtones that are going to affect the skin tone. Even though it's a black and white image, we can affect the midtone, the skin tones using that midtones area. So what I'll do first of all, let's give it a bit of a final look that I did for the original picture of Andy. We're on the shadows now. I'm going to add some coolness into the shadows. So I'll first of all click and find a cool blue tone that I want to use within the shadow area. So we'll say something like that. Once I've got the blue that I want, I can then control the saturation without affecting the color by holding down the shift key. So that locks in now that particular blue. So I can then use this slider here to control the saturation. So it's really giving me a lot of control there. So I only want to add a little bit of that blue into the shadow areas. So something like that. We'll then go to the midtones and I'll warm those up. So I'm going to choose like a warm orangey yellow kind of color. Something around about there would be fine. Again, hold down that shift key, click and drag it down, just add a little bit of warmth in. And then we'll go to the highlights and we'll cool those down as well. So maybe something around about there, that blue there, let's have a look, around about there, and we'll obviously desaturate it as well, something like that. Now, once we've got those, I can then go back to the main view here. So I see all three of these color wheels in. And on the shadows, if I ordinarily just add blue coolness into the shadow areas, that's going to kind of affect all of the dark areas. And obviously I don't want pure black to contain any color. I need it to be pure black. So what I do is I just darken the shadows down, and the darker I make those shadows, the color comes off them. But the other benefit of that is it adds contrast into the image. And I do that using this slider underneath the colorway here. So look, if I drag it over to the left, can you see how that adds contrast? But it's also taking out, you won't see it on your screen, it's also taking out the color that is on the darkest area of that particular picture just there. So go for that. And now if I want to change the brightness of his skin to make it look like it's coming forward and add a bit more impact to it, I can just come to the midtones, which is this one here. We've got that slider underneath and we can just control the skin tone just there. So I find that for me a lot easier rather than going through all those red, orange, green, blue, aqua sliders. Just three color wheels, which I can add some color into the shadows, midtones and highlights, and then just use the midtones to give the skin tone just a bit of a boost, so it really just kind of stand out. So I kind of like that one a lot. So you can just there. All right, so that's that one. Right, the next thing I was asked about this. Right, I'm going to dive back into this picture here of my friend Trigger. Can you see this sort of shadow on the wall and on the floor just here? I was really kind of a bit sneaky with this one when I posted it, because I made no mention of it whatsoever. And people were saying, oh, I really love the effect there where you've used a gobo, where you've got a light and you've got like a pattern in front of it where it's gone through there to create that light shadow onto the wall there. So this kind of looks like I've used the light coming through a window where there's some blinds, when in truth, I didn't at all. I want to show you how that was done. And I can't take any credit for it. It was actually a plugin. I don't have anything to do with the people that make this plugin. I just want to make you aware of it because it is pretty damn good. So this is the out of camera shot again of trigger. Let me send this back over into Photoshop just to give you an idea of what this plugin is and how you can use it. And what I will do is I will give myself just a little bit more space over on the left hand side just here, just so we can see a bit more of that shadow when I bring it in. So let's just again use that content aware. Not going to be too fussy about how this comes out, but we'll go content aware fill. That will be easy for Photoshop to work on. Something like that will be fine. Click OK, get rid of that selection and we'll flatten it. And I'll just use the patch tool just to tidy this up just a little bit. Drag that out of the way like so. Very quick, down and dirty job just there, something like that. Do love the patch tool for tidying up areas. So good. Right, so the actual plugin that I'm going to be using is something called Boris FX. And this is a company who are actually started, and they still do, make visual effects for the movie industry. So these people really, really know what they're doing. But they've also created a plugin that can be used within Photoshop to use similar effects from the movie industry within our own pictures. So really, really cool stuff. Now I'm only going to be scratching the scratch on the surface to show you how we do this shadows, but let me just show you anyway. I'll create a copy as always, and we'll go to the filter menu and choose Boris FX. And this one's called Optics 2022. And when you open the actual plugin, first of all, it'll ask you, do you want to reapply the filters that you used the last time? And I'm going to say no. Now at the bottom, we've got so many things. I haven't even discovered a fraction of what's available in here. And I think this is mainly for people who are going to be really into doing their compositing. I've got a friend over in the Netherlands, Rodrigue, who does so much with this, lighting effects, and it's just wonderful, really, really clever stuff. But you can see at the bottom here, all the different things that you've got. You've got Film Lab, gradients and tints, images, distortions, particles, where you've got explosions and all this kind of stuff. But the one I'm going to go to is just the light section. And it's this little one on the right hand side. It's looks like a load of blinds. If I click on that, straight away it puts in this light through the blinds kind of effect. And I can click and I can drag it around like so. Now on the left hand side, they have got hundreds and hundreds of different things that you could use to be the shadow, the gobo that you wanted to use. I'll just keep it really, really simple. So let me just say I'll go for this one here. This group of like a paneled window just there, and I can click and drag it around. I'll just zoom out just a touch, and I've also got these handles in each corner, top left, top right, bottom left, and bottom right, and I can use that to distort how that shadow looks. So what I'll do first of all is I'll just put it on the wall, and we'll just drag it down like so, something like that. Just going really quick, just to give you an idea of how this works. And let's just take that top one there, and I'll bring that to say maybe there, and that one to there. Now, if you wanted one to be on the floor as well, in fact, once you've got that one there, first of all, you can see there's loads of controls here where you can change the color, the blurriness, all kinds of different things. But I'll say I'll just leave it like that for now. I'll then add another of these shadows. So I click on the top left-hand corner to add another layer. We go back to that light section, and I'll try and find the one I just used, but if I can't, I'll just grab anything. Let's just go for this one here, and then I can put this one on the floor. So let's just reshape it. So now you know the secret. I didn't actually use a gobo in the original picture at all. I just used this very clever, very, very clever plugin from Boris FX. So let's go to something like that. And I'll reposition it at the bottom, say something like that, and then I'll just click apply. Because I created a duplicate layer, that's what the effect is going to be applied to, so then I can access things like opacity and layer masks and what have you. So there you go, there's where it is now. I could use a layer mask to brush it off Trigger's knee just here and his arm if I wanted to, but we'll kind of take it for granted that you know that you do that. But then we can just lower the opacity to go for something really subtle. So you got like a little bit of a shadow coming through there. So that's just a really cool, it's a big plugin to get for that one particular bit. But I'm sure that, you know, you'll dive around it and you'll find many more things in there that you could find useful. But just that on its own, I think is just, it can be a real game changer and just lifting how your portraits look. Because when I originally posted that picture of Trigger, that shadow was one of the main things that people commented on. And it was literally just a grey background, simple grey background behind them, made more interesting just by adding that little bit of a shadow on there. So something else for you to look at just there. Right, what else? Let's have a quick one here then. So last night I did another video for my YouTube channel. And it was to do with a dark tone. It's a very, very popular effect that's going around social media at the moment on your images. And I showed how we can create it as a preset and a one-click fix. There was one question that came up about that, or has been coming up since I posted that yesterday at 6 o'clock. So I'll go through quickly show you the effect now, but also I'll just cover what that question was. I'll just dive into this picture here, my friend Simon Foxy. And just show you how we first of all create this effect. So this image at the moment, if I just open up all the tabs at the bottom as well, this is a TIFF. So this image is not a raw image. This one has been worked on. It's been to Photoshop and it's come back. So this is a TIFF image. If you were doing this on a raw image, you would see one thing just slightly different, only one thing, all right? And that's what the question has been about. So the first part of creating this look is we go to the Basics tab within the Develop module, and we add a little bit of warmth. So we've got the temperature and the tint sliders. Now, because I'm using a TIFF, or anything other than a raw file rather, you'll see that my temperature slider is numerical. So it goes up in like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If it was a raw image, it would be on the Kelvin scale. So it would be like 5,400. So I'd have to change the temperature, literally the temperature of it. In the video I showed on my YouTube channel, don't worry too much about the numbers. Just add a bit of warmth. That's all you need to do. It doesn't have to be exact because this can be all very much to your own personal taste. But let me just show you the actual settings that I used for that effect. And then how you can quickly apply that to other images as well. So the first thing to do for this effect is we get the temperature slider and we increase it just a little bit. In this example, I went to around about 10. Tint, we'll do the same as well, around about 10. We're then going to add a bit of contrast to this image. The look that's really popular is for a real punchy, contrasty image. So we'll add some contrast in it. I'll take it to around about plus 30-ish. And to increase the dark areas, I'm going to drag down the shadows a little bit and take down the blacks as well. And you can see when we do that already, that's making quite a difference to the image, and we're starting to lose a bit of detail in those shadow areas. So to bring some of that detail back, what I will do is go to the tone curve, and the bottom left here is where we've got the blacks. And if I drag that upwards, you can see that it kind of flattens out the contrast in the image by bringing more and more detail into the shadow areas. And also the higher up I go, it brings it into the mid-tone areas as well. I don't want it to affect the mid-tone areas. I only want to just do a little bit of a lift in the darker areas. So to lock it in place, I'll just click down on that line just there to put this little anchor point in. Then I can click on the actual bottom left and just drag upwards just a little bit. It doesn't need to be a lot, just a little bit, just to lift it like so. So if I go now before and after, before and after. The next thing we do is we go into the HSL section. We go to the hue and I'll increase the reds. And I'll take the yellows all the way down to -100. And you can see in the background now, that's starting to change the color there of anything of that yellow color. It's kind of giving it like a nice brownish kind of tint. Then we'll go to the saturation. I'm going to leave the skin tones alone, which is going to be mainly on the reds. I'll take some of the orange out of the skin tone. So I'll take it down just a little bit like so. And the rest of them, we're going to take all the way down to -100. We then got the luminance, the red channel here. With this, we can actually increase the brightness of the skin. You can see just there, see that affecting the skin. So I'll take that up just a little bit and I'll probably leave it there. And then we'll go to the effects just to add just a little bit of a vignette. Cool. So that's the effect. If I do it before and after, love this effect. It is so popular. But again, now let's just create a quick preset. We'll go create preset and I'll just call this dark, making sure that we check all so that every single effect that we could have possibly done is going to be included within the preset. But most importantly, at the bottom here where it says the amount slider, okay, that little amount slider just there. So we'll click on create. That'll then make it over into the presets over on the left hand side so that we can then apply this very quickly to other images. So for example, let's just go to this one just here. And if I just put my cursor over it and say dark, straight away, look, applies it. Love the look on that. We've also got this one here straight away. And the great thing is we've got that amount slider. So look, we can apply more of that effect or less of it. So you can really fine tune and dial in that particular look that you want. Go for that one there. And let's have a look on this one just here. My brother and sister-in-law will apply it onto that one. So, I mean, I like the picture as it is just there, but when I add this dark one onto it, liking that, and we'll just reduce it just a little bit and then just do before and after, really liking that. So the fact that you got an amount slider there, you can really decide how much of that effect you want, how much of that punch you want to it, or just a little bit of it just to change the look very quickly of a picture from something like that to something like that. So really, really cool stuff. I like that a lot. Right, what else? Let's have a look here. We've got this. In fact, yeah, let me show you something else to do with the masking. There was something to do with eyes I wanted to quickly show you. So if we've got time, I'll show you that. But let me just show you. Let's just get rid of this stuff off Ian just here. Let's go to the masking and we'll go to delete all masks. All right, so with your portraits, creative portraits, you might want to add a bit of a light behind somebody. There's loads of ways that you could do this. Most of them would have been used in Photoshop to show how you can add that back wall light. But a very quick way using AI, using the actual masks within Lightroom can help us create one very, very quickly. This is how you would do it. So we're in the masking. We're going to go to radial gradient. And I'm going to click down and drag out like so on Ian, like that. Then we'll just come over to the controls for the masking just there. And we'll go to the tone and I'm going to increase the exposure all the way up like that. Then we'll go back to that mask and say, look, I want to keep this radial gradient, but I don't want you to include the person within it. So we'll click on subtract and we'll say subject. And very quickly, it'll get rid of it. So now look, if I come in here, I can drag this around. Let's just quickly drag it around. I've now got a spotlight put behind Ian. So even though I'd have maybe thought it would have been good to do that at the time, I'm not condoning the fact that, I'm not saying that you should do this. If you can do it at the time of the shoot, then great. But this for me gives me flexibility. I can either have it or not have it. But there we've got a spotlight behind him. So we can increase the exposure on it. We can change the size of it and what have you. But again, great thing about this is AI presets, kind of intelligent actions within Lightroom. If I save just this now as a preset, let's just try it out. So create preset. We'll call this one light behind subject. We'll say don't include any of this. The only one we want to include is just the masking. And click on the masking just there and then click on create. So now we've got an intelligent action that we can use on our portraits within Lightroom. So let's have a look. Let's go to some other images here. So let's say the picture of Anthony again. All right, so we go over to the left-hand side. We look for that particular one we've just made, light behind subject. And there we go. There is the light behind the subject. So if I go to the masking, I can then come in and I can change the position of the light behind Anthony. I can change the brightness of it, completely flexible. But these are processes I haven't had to repeat. I can just click on it to add it into the picture. It's that clever. Let's just say if I wanted to go for, in fact, let's just try it. Let's try it on my brother. I haven't tried this one yet. Let's just try it on the picture of my brother and sister-in-law. Let's see if it works on this one here. So light behind subject, click on it. And there we go. That actually does work. Great thing is, again, we've got the control over it. So I can come in, I can change. Look at that. Let's just make it a little bit less obvious. There we go. Liking that a lot. I can change the size of it. I can reposition it and just take down the brightness. So clever how these presets now have got artificial intelligence so they can analyze the image as you apply it. Just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant stuff. Love that. Really, really clever. Okay, how are we doing for time? 45 minutes. I'll do one more little thing to show you. And it was to do with my friend Krish, which I took a picture of. He works at Carmarthen Cameras in Wales. Wonderful, wonderful chap. I was with him last Friday doing my printing seminar. But when I did a quick picture of him, this was one of the out of camera shots, which was kind of a little bit flat. So much so that this was one of the outtakes where we didn't have any detail whatsoever in the eye. So there's lots of techniques I've got on my channel which show how we can work on eyes. But by playing around, I found something else out earlier on. Let me just show you. Again, send this over into Photoshop. And let's just zoom in like so. Now, we can use blend modes, we can use all kinds of different stuff. But one of the things I found out earlier on was that I can actually just use sharpening in Photoshop to bring back some detail. But when we do it, first of all, it doesn't work. There's one extra thing we need to do. It's kind of like a bit of a hack. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to click plus to add a new layer. And I'm going to come over to the toolbar where we have access to the sharpen tool. This is so underused. It is a brilliant, brilliant tool within Photoshop. It really is. In the options bar at the top of the screen, just make sure that it says sample all layers and protect detail. Anywhere that you see a little tick box that says protect detail, put a tick in it, get your money's worth. But when we first of all use it and I click and drag down over his eye, we don't see anything happening whatsoever. All right, so that's not going to be working. But to make it work, all I need to do is this. Let's just delete that layer. I'll make a selection of his eyes. So we'll go from like, hold down the elliptical marquee tool, drag out a selection to be around about, say, there. I'll add another one on this eye by holding down the shift key, clicking and dragging. You can see that we can't get a perfect circle like that at the moment, but if you just let go very quickly of the shift key and then press it down again, it'll create a circle, which you can then reposition. So let's just put that just there. And then we'll just go to any adjustment layer. It doesn't matter which one we use. We'll just click on something like a levels adjustment. And I'm just going to use a blend mode first of all. And the one I'm going to use is linear dodge. And the only reason I've used it is because it allows me to see just a little bit of color and detail in the eyes, even though it's a small amount. That's all I need to have. Because now what I can do is I can then click on the actual picture of Krish in the layers panel and add that layer directly above and then use the sharpening. And look what happens now when I use the sharpening tool. Come into the sharpening tool. Let's just zoom in on this eye just here. And all I do now is press down and go around his eye once and twice. Go to here, once, twice. So already we're getting loads of detail coming back in the eye just there. Now something else we can do. Let's just now, let's first of all get rid of this. I'll just go very quickly, get a brush. We'll get rid of the excess that we don't want on his eye just here. Like so, get rid of it off the pupil, and I'll just brush away on the outside area just there. And on the outside area just there. So obviously now we can control opacity of all of this to see, look, how much of that effect we want in the eyes. We can also take it a little step further because these eyes are really dark. There's no detail. And I might have shown this in the previous webinar, but again, it's a really cool effect that you maybe have to call on just occasionally. Let me just add a new layer. I'll get a rectangle, the elliptical marquee tool, make another selection of his eye just here. I only need to make one at the moment. And I'm going to fill that with gray. So we go edit, fill, 50% gray. Keep the selection active. Let me just zoom in just a little bit on it. We'll then go to filter, we'll go to noise and add noise, making sure that it's monochromatic noise. We don't want any color in there at all. Monochromatic noise. We'll click OK. Then filter, blur, and we'll go for radial blur. By default, it'll be on spin, like a wheels of a car. We have it on zoom. So have it on zoom and then like a spaceship with those lines going away from you like that. So about there would be good, and then click OK. And then what we can do is just use a blend mode. Now, rather than me clicking and going over them like, in fact, no, we'll do it in real time. Let's have a look. There we go. There we go. That's pretty cool, liking that. Or color dodge, what's that one do? Let's go for soft light. So now look, if I zoom in, there's no texture on the eyes, texture on the eyes, no texture and texture. And we just get a mask and we can just brush that away just there. Let's put all those detail, all the eye layers there into a group, and then we can just control the opacity just to give them a bit of a lift. When you're working on eyes, just a little bit of a tip, don't kind of keep them all really, really close as you're working on it. When you've actually done something, take it back to the kind of view that you would have, and then control the opacity of it to see what it would need to be. It can be really deceiving when they're really, really close. So we only need to take up just a little bit. There's before and after. Might bring it up just a touch more so you can see it a bit clearer. Before and after, just to give the eyes just a little bit of lift that originally were completely black, no detail in there at all. But I think that's it. We've kind of raced through it. There's so much stuff being thrown out there. Some stuff that's a bit of fun, but it's got a serious side to it, and just some extra little tips and techniques that you can use on your portraits to give them a bit of a lift. Definitely check out that Boris FX. That's really, really useful. I mean, the shadows there are really good, but there's so much more that's built into it that, you know, like I say, I've only scratched the surface of what's available in there. And also check out the YouTube channel. There's tons of stuff on the YouTube channel, going through all kinds of different techniques for portraits, landscapes, you name it. But just as a final one, I'm going to go through some questions now as we do. But just so I don't forget, keep an eye on the chat. If you haven't seen it already, there will be a discount code in there. I think that's coming in from Camera Center UK, who obviously partners with us on this particular webinar. But let's have a look, see if we've got any questions coming in, see if I can remember how to look at them as well. Let's have a look. Right, do you use the different, all this is to do with the monitor. Do you use the different puck settings during your editing process, or do you just leave it on one main setting? All right, so the puck, this is what's with the actual displays. I can't actually bring it round. Although just the oh no, there we go, just there, that's the puck there. So that there allows me to control certain things about my display, and one of the things on there, it's got number 1, 2 and 3. The great thing about BenQ displays, without making this sound like a sales pitch, is that they're hardware calibrated, meaning I can calibrate it and it's the actual color that the display knows it should display is held on a chip within it. It's not going to be having something, a bit of software going through the graphics card then going into the display. So it's a hardware calibrated display, which is a lot more reliable. But also I have different calibrations I can set. I can set up to 3 different calibrations, and I do use 2 in particular. 2 different temperatures that I set my displays to. One for general day-to-day work, which is 6,500 Kelvin, which is what's called D65, and that is the default industry standard temperature that things like mobile phones, iPads, TVs, and all those are set to. And that's what I generally will use when I'm kind of just browsing or working on an image that is never going to be printed. It's only ever going to be seen online. When I'm working on images that I know are going to be printed, or I'm going to be printing an image after I've, you know, if I've worked on it in D65 and then changed my mind, I'll then change over to a different calibration, which I have set to 5,800 Kelvin. And that's a nice warmth there on the screen, which is going to give me a better print to paper, screen to paper match when I print it. And also if I wanted to send images to a print lab that were going to be bigger than what my printer could do, that's the actual calibration I would look at them in the screen at, because 5,800 Kelvin is pretty much a standard temperature that a lot of color labs, printing labs work to. So yes, I do use the puck. Only 2 settings really, D65 or 5,800 Kelvin on 2 different calibrations. Do neural filters work if the face isn't head on, but 3/4 or side view? Do you know what? That's from Stella. Yes, it does. I tried those crazy things that I did with Ian, where I changed his hair and what have you. I tried that on Trigger when I was playing around, and he is, as you saw in the images we've showed of him there, he is kind of like 3/4 onto the camera, side on, and it still worked. It still worked. It's not 100% every single time, but it's pretty damn good. It's really, really clever stuff. Let's have a look here. Questions. I want to make sure I get these. Ed, about the depth filter. To use this filter, does your image have to be sharp front to back to start with? That's a good question. But my answer to that, Ed, is that I've never considered that when I've used it. Obviously, what it won't do, if you're looking to make, if you've already photographed it wide open, whereby something that's really close to you is out of focus, or sorry, if you've done a landscape, let's say, where you've got it so that your foreground is out of focus but your background is in focus, you then use the depth blur filter. Obviously, what that's not going to do is de-blur what is already built into the picture when you took it. But I've only ever used it on images where it's something like with trigger, where it's maybe been shot at something like f8, f5.6, f8, where there is depth of field from the foreground through to the background. So I can then apply it, fake it, if you like, within the depth blur. I've not tried it on any other way. So I hope that answers the question there, Ed. Stella, answered that one. Trevor, what color space do you set on your BenQ monitor before you calibrate it? I don't. I literally leave it, and I will then set that in the actual software itself. So in the Palette Master software, because in there we have what's called panel native. So I don't say I want my monitor to be Adobe RGB. When I go through, we have all these different choices. You could set it to sRGB, Adobe RGB. But one of the options, certainly within the BenQ's Palette Master element software, is panel native. That's the one I use, because you've paid your money. You want to make sure you get as much out of this display as you can. I don't want to restrict this display. I want it to be able to show me as much of the color as it can. And that's relevant because I tend to work in my images in ProPhoto RGB. So it's a bigger color space than Adobe RGB. It's a very, very big color space. So big, in fact, that a lot of the colors aren't even visible to the naked eye. But I will work in ProPhoto RGB, certainly in Lightroom, because that's the default color space. And when I go to print, I will also send them to the printer in ProPhoto RGB. Different if I'm sending to a lab, I'll always send them in sRGB. A lot of pro labs will ask for images to be sent in sRGB. That's that one there. Does Boris Effects also work in Lightroom Lightroom Classic? Yes, it does. You'll literally just go to the file menu, export, and it'll, photo or edit in, and it'll give the option for Boris Effects. So you've got that. Bliss, could you repeat the name of the plugin? Boris, as in Johnson, Boris Johnson, FX. And what else we got? Is there any benefit I saving settings to presets as opposed to profiles? Yes, there is. Yeah, great question, Carl. There is definitely a benefit to saving as a preset as opposed to a profile, because with a preset, you still get access to all of the settings afterwards. With a profile, it's like a LUT, a lookup table. You click on it, you apply it, that's it. You can't then dive in and adjust the settings. So wherever you can, I would suggest you always save it as a preset. Okay, profiles are great, but presets are better, in my opinion. So there you go. I don't think there's any more questions. So yep, Kate just said no more questions. Thanks, Glyn. Brilliant stuff. So folks, again, thank you so much for joining me. I hope that came through clear. Don't forget that if you did register, you obviously will get a recording of this as well, so you can slow me down. You'll get that tomorrow at some point. I should have mentioned that maybe at the start there. If you can't stick around, you will get the recording, but you'll know anyway, because these folks are so organized, they'll send them to you anyway. But there you go. Thank you very much. Please do check out Lumesca, check out BenQ, obviously, and check out my YouTube channel. But again, thank you so much for joining me today. I am now going to dive off and have a well-earned meal. So thank you very much.